Okay. Laharchik me kabbalata. This chapter is going to deal with the imperative of trying to distance oneself from ever coming to accept tzedakah. In other words, a person has to try their best to avoid being on the dole. Okay, la'olam yarchik adam et atzmo milakabel tzedakah v'yigalgel atzmo b'tzar shelo yitztarech labrias. A person should try to distance himself from ever having to accept tzedakah, and it would be preferable for him to accept suffering than to be dependent on others for his sustenance. And so did our sages charge us, and they said, better that you make your Sabbaths weekdays than to be dependent upon other people. Whereas even if it means you'll have to live on a very meager kind of subsistence, it's better to do that. Kol mi she'eno tzarech litol tzedakah u'merameh ta'am v'notel, eino meit ad sheyitztarech labriot. Any person who does not need tzedakah and deceives other people. Once in a while I see these videos where they follow this homeless person after a day of putting up a sign saying no food, need to eat, and they followed this lady. She got into her car, drove back to her house. Turns out she's a middle-class housewife who has just some kind of sickness, or whatever. So anyone who doesn't need tzedakah and ends up deceiving other people to collect it will not leave this world until they end up actually being poor and needing other people's charity. Okay, next. Kol mi shetzarech litol aval kedei shelo litol v'lo lahatil atzmo latzibur mitzaer atzmo v'dochek et hasha v'chai chayei tza'ar. He says, by contrast, if a person does need to take tzedakah, but he forces himself to live with great deprivation so as not to make himself a ward of the state, and he really, really pushes himself to live with, in absolute squalor, eino meis ad sheyafarnes acherim. So the converse blessing will befall him. He won't leave this world until he has the wealth to be able to support others. Va'alav hakatuv omer, baruch hagever asher yiftach b'Hashem. And about such a person it is said, blessed is the man who places his trust in God. Now, obviously, you have to know the limits of this kind of policy. It's very subjective. At what point do I say, I can't do this anymore? I've got to ask for a scholarship, or I can't do this anymore. I've got to ask for a break, or I've got to ask for some tzedakah funds. And it's very, very, for some people, it's very, very difficult to take tzedakah. For other people, it's very easy to take tzedakah. And they feel a sense of entitlement. And there's all different kinds, all different varieties in between. But it's good to review this. If a person does really need some financial assistance, and he can't actually survive unless he takes, such as an elderly person or a sick person or someone who's truly suffering, and then out of a sense of pride, he does not take, and then eventually causes his own demise. Then he's a murderer. He's the victim. He's the murder victim. And it turns out that he ended up committing an avera by not taking. Okay, so again, there's all different ways of looking at this and all different scenarios. Yesh Misha Omer, Shekol Hamisim al Libo La'asok Batorah Velo La'asos Malacho L'Hisparnis Min Tzedakah. Says there is an opinion. If a person commits himself, he says, you know what? I've decided that I want to learn Torah. And I've decided I'm not going to work Who's going to support me? I'll go around, rely on the community support. He says, Hareza mechalal Hashem umevazeh et haTorah. I'm surprised he says this. He says, such a person is making a chilul Hashem and is disgracing the Torah. Mekevin she'asur lehanot midivrei Torah. Because a person is not, he's quoting the Ramah, because a person is not permitted to benefit from words of Torah. And this is brought down in the Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim also, after the laws of Tefillah, and it says you go about your business because it's part of the halacha. Any Torah that does not involve work will eventually become nullified, and it'll cause a person to sin. Ki ha'oni ya'avirenu al da'as kono, because poverty will cause a person to eventually rebel against his maker. In other words, a person shouldn't take the attitude, I don't need to work. I'll sit and learn, let the community support me, and I'll figure it out. You know, if you don't have a financial plan, it's A, a chilul Hashem, B, it's going to cause your Torah to eventually not be attained, because you're eventually just going to be so bitter and you're going to have all of these worries about what are you going to do about supporting your family, and you'll be embittered, and you'll be embittered eventually against Hashem. He says, and if a person, even if a person is a great rabbi, but for whatever reason he loses his job, the yeshiva closes, whatever happens, and he doesn't have a source of parnas anymore, yasok be'umnus va'afilu be'umnus minuveles val yistarich labrias. Better that he should get a job, even if it's an unseemly job, like bag groceries, right, or whatever it is. In the times of the Gemara, it was like becoming a borsiki, which is a tanner that would make clothes. You come home, you smell bad after a hard day's work, but that's a day of hard labor is really what Hashem wants. Hashem doesn't want a person to live in squalor. Hashem doesn't want a person to throw himself at the mercy of the community. And even if a person is a chashav harav, but he runs out of parnasa, he's got to go out and get a job. That's really and let's take a look at the Aruch HaShulchan in Orach Chaim Siman Kuf Nun Vav, because it's really the source of a lot of this halacha. So if we take a look, let me just bring up Sefaria Kuf Nun Vav. One 56. And I'll share my screen. Okay. This portion of the Shulchan Aruch, by the way, is written right after the laws of Tefillah are written. So after you've gotten up in the morning and you've said all your brachos, and you said Kriya Shema, and you daven Shemona Esrei, and you've gone through all of those halachos, and then we talk about the halachos that come at the end of davening. Once davening is over, so we have Siman Kuf Nun Vav. Achar kach yelech la'asakav. I think first it says that you should set aside time for Torah study. Let's see, what's the previous siman? Right? He says a person should, once you leave the Beis HaKnesses, you should go to the Beis Medrash to study Torah. Then, once you finished your shir, after learning Torah, achar kach yelech la'asakav. Now it's time to go to work. Okay? The chol Torah she'eni mamalacha sofa betela v'goreres ava. He says, because any Torah study that is not accompanied with work will eventually be lost, and it will cause a person to sin. Ki ha'aniyut ma'avirina ta'adam al da'ato v'adas kana, because poverty causes a person, it's true, Chazal say both things. Wealth can cause a person to rebel against God. It's even in the Torah. Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat. That Jeshurun, Jewish people, become fat and they kick and they rebel. So wealth is a challenge, okay? But also poverty presents a religious challenge, a challenge of one's faith. Okay. Either one is fine. Either, yeah, no, but it's not. It's not to be taken literally that you have to do it in this order. He says. He said, it certainly is virtuous to study a little bit after davening, but if, let's say, you only have 5 minutes after minyan, because you got to get to work early, so then you can go to a shir before and listen to a dvar halacha after minyan. It all depends on your schedule, right? That's why he says over here, even if after davening you have to rush right away to work, yilmod pasuk echad halacha echad. At least learn one pasuk or one halacha. Right? That's what we do. Yeah. I correct me if I'm wrong. Before I got here, was there also a dvar halacha after minyan? Because it seems like when I got here, people were surprised that we were doing a dvar halacha after minyan. I try to institute it for each minyan, but I'm not sure if every minyan is doing it. I hope that I'm pretty sure they're doing it in every minyan, but it's really what you're supposed to do. But in any event, going back to this halacha, umishi yesh lo umnus davar tovu. He says anyone who has a trade or a skill for labor as a business, that's a good thing. V'kach amru chachamenu zal b'kiddushin shechayav adam lelamed beno umanut. Our sages also tell us in the Gemara that a man is obligated to teach his child a trade. V'chol she'eno melamdo umanut ki'ilu melamdo listut. By neglecting to teach your child a trade, it's as if you're teaching him how to be a robber, because what's he going to do? V'kama toim bazel lemor. He says a lot of people make a mistake to think that knowing how to engage in business and learning a trade is disgraceful. It's beneath the dignity of a Jew to go into the trades, right? And that's a big mistake. Shaharek, or it's not just a trade, but it's to go into medicine or to law or accounting, anything. There's some people who feel, no, I want my son to become a scholar. He says, but that's not true. Everyone has to teach their child a way to make a living outside the base medrash. He says, we find many Tanoim and Amoraim were businessmen, and they had their own business, and they had a trade. V'ita b'midrash Rabba Bereshis chavipihi hamalacha mizchus avos. Right? How wonderful work is. It's even greater. It's even greater than zchus avos. It's even greater. Knowing how to make a living on your own is better for you in God's eyes than having the zchus of your ancestors. Shezchus avos hitzila mamon umalacha hitzila nefashas. He says because the zchus of having good ancestors may end up saving your property, but knowing how to work will save your life. Shenemar lulei elokei avi Avraham ki ata rekam shalachtani et onyi ve'et yegia kapi ra'eh elokim vayochach amesh. This is what Yaakov said to Lavan. He said, when Lavan came to pursue him, he said, were it not for the God of Avraham, my grandfather, you would have sent me away empty-handed. So it was in the zuchus of my zayda that I was able to have some money in my pocket. But my poverty and my hard work, God has seen and has saved me from you doing anything to harm me. And that's the way he explains it. Kolomar shalohar go lovin Yaakov befigovo. That, in other words, the reason why you're not able to kill me is because I worked hard. And so, in other words, you learn from this pasuk, my Zayda Avraham arranged that I could have money in my pocket, but my hard work is what caused you not to be able to harm me, because God came to you in a dream and said, "Don't lay a finger on Yaakov." It is considered to be one of the highest virtues for a person to live off of his hard work. Shenemar yegia kapecha ki tochel ashrecha v'tov lach. That the work of your palms you shall consume. Fortunate are you, and good it is good for you. Ashrecha ba'olam hazeh v'tov lecha la'olam haba shekulo tov. It is fortunate for you in this world, as you'll enjoy the life of this world. You get a geshmak at a life because you'll have the satisfaction of having worked a hard day's work. And v'tov lach la'olam haba shekulo tov will be good for you in the next world as well. Okay. Yeah.
Where things have also changed for women. I mean, in the past, women they would take care of the household and children and everything else. But today, income is needed most of the time from women coming from the household in some way or another. So is there an obligation where things have changed, the way society has changed now, where women have a certain obligation in this matter too?
I think a lot of it depends on the priorities of the couple in question. There may be a joint decision between the husband and the wife that the husband says, I'm going to work hard enough so that you don't have to work. And I want you to raise children. I want us to have a big family, and I want us to, and that's a value that the both of them hold dear. I'll work, you stay at home, raise the kids, and it's a partnership.
Becoming more clear. It's not that nobody does it, but
I don't know. I think I think you're right. I think that a lot of people do rely on two incomes today. But it certainly doesn't negate anything that we're saying, right? I think you're right. I think that because of the financial realities of our world today, a lot of young couples, both of them have to work. But eventually, at some point, the husband makes enough for both of them, if that's their value. Some couples have a different value, and that's also a virtue. That their value is we both like to work outside the home. We'll have a certain number of children that we feel, or wife says, I'll take off a certain number of years from work so that I can work on raising the kids, and then I want to go back to work after. There's all different systems work, Yeah, he's just quoting the Shulchan Aruch. Yeah.
We all have to sit and work.
Well, listen, I do think that the Haredi world has also changed in the last 25 years. There's now a realization that the vast majority of the community has to get a job.
Yeah, that's a practical.
Yeah, so the reality has changed. Right. I think people I think so. What we're looking at is a slice of history that lasted for, I would say, about 50 years. Right after the war, a number of Gedolim said, Europe has shattered, the Jewish world, and the Torah world has also been shattered. So for the foreseeable future, they said, sit and learn. We'll figure out how to raise money, but we have an obligation to restore our Torah centers to world Jewry. And therefore, there was an imbalanced emphasis on Talmud Torah. And many, many people who are my age drank the Kool-Aid and ended up suffering horribly because of it. But I think the intent was a virtuous intent. It was a noble intent. My age and older, probably. People who, like Rosh Yeshiva said, it's after the Shoah. There's such a dearth of high-level Torah study. You sit and learn, have bitachon in Hashem. It'll all work out. That is not the refrain anymore, at least not that I can see in the younger generation. The younger generation that's coming out of Lakewood is extremely industrious. There's a tremendous amount of wealth that is coming out of the yeshiva world today. Even as you can see an example, even in our own community, there's more wealth in the yeshiva segment of the community than there is in the, or at least as much wealth as there is in the modern, well, let's say non-yeshivish Jewish community, right? And so I think that there was a recognition that we perhaps are de-emphasizing this aspect of the Shulchan Aruch because Eis Lasos Lashem. It is a time, we are at a time of peril, we are at a time of crisis, and we need to rebuild Torah. That was the cheshbon. And I think to a large degree, it was a successful endeavor. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. My argument, like sort of my pushback to your suggestion is that today, like in 2023, like you could have made that criticism when you and I were younger, right? 30 years ago, you could say, like, why is everyone, so many guys learning in Kollel, they gave up their careers, they drank the Kool-Aid, they did all of this stuff. But I think by and large today, most guys are not staying in Kollel. And most guys are really going out there, and I think maybe the pendulum has swung a little bit too far to the other side now, where you're seeing guys are just obsessed with making money, even in the yeshiva world. And it's becoming an unhealthy obsession. So, we got to do something about that too. But as long as a person is kovea itim l'Torah, he sets aside time at the end of a long day's work, comes back to the base medrash after an exhausting day at work, I think that's the most we can expect from someone. It's that he's living the life. What's your rebuttal, Moshe?
But you have still, I agree that it's changing. There's a lot more people who are want to make progress, and they have to, or you're not going to make it. But there's still an obsession with sitting and learning, and just because as I gave this is the way we do things, and it's not, and that's completely against what we're seeing in halacha. Even with the destruction of Torah, it's already been 7 generations or 6 since the Holocaust.
No, it's 3. It's 3 generations. 3 generations. So. Yeah. Yeah, it hasn't come to Israel yet. I would agree, Joby. It hasn't come to Israel yet. And Israel has this unhealthy dynamic to the point where, and it's quite fascinating, why are you seeing a much lower rate of aliyah in the yeshiva world in North America than you're seeing from the Dati Leumi world? Number one, because Zionism runs through the course of our religious theology, right? We say the prayer for the state of Israel. We believe that this is Reshit Smichad Gulatenu. This is a harbinger for the messianic redemption, right? Which a lot of people in the yeshiva world just don't subscribe to, for whatever reason they don't subscribe to it. But there's something more. And someone pointed this out to me a couple of years ago. Why would a person who's in the yeshiva world want to make aliyah? Why would they want to make aliyah? What, to go live in Kiryat Sefer, Beitar, one of these communities where everyone's living in poverty, right? Why would I want to do that? I want to be able to live in a respectable way for my family. So even if I have a source of making parnasa, the peer pressure in Israel is that they romanticize poverty because everyone's poor. Or a large number of yeshiva people are poor, and people who go out and make a living and are industrious outside the base medrash are looked down upon as being the lower class of the Haredi world, even when they end up supporting so many of the mostos. So why would a guy want to do that? Here, they're held in very high regard, and they're encouraged to live a life that is of both spiritual and physical quality. And there it's not true. So that's why a lot of yeshiva people are not making aliyah, and they de-emphasize this mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. You don't have to be a Zionist to recognize that there's a mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael, but for some reason they're able to get around it. Okay, a lot of stuff to think about. Have a wonderful day.